Hello, good afternoon and welcome. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. The show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and as ever, it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times disagreeing, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster Danny Kelly and also comedian Steve N. Allen. Before we get started, here's your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you very much indeed. I'm Polly Middlehurst, and these are your latest news headlines at 4 o'clock. Sir Keir Starmer says the reputation of the country and its democracy is being trashed by the Prime Minister. It's after the government tried to prevent former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson's suspension for breaching lobbying rules. Parliament's due to hold an emergency debate on standards tomorrow. The Sun's associate editor, Kevin Kavanagh, told GBNews the Prime Minister will survive the criticism.
I think that Boris will go through a very rough time tomorrow in Parliament and will get a kicking, and he will take it probably with his usual rueful smile. And to be honest, I think that no matter how big this seems at the moment, this will pale into the distance as other events unfold in the coming weeks and months. And I don't think, actually, that this particular event will have any impact on the next election.
The United States is reopening its borders to UK visitors who are fully vaccinated against COVID from tomorrow. The country has been effectively closed since early 2020 due to the pandemic. Travellers from Ireland and the 26 Schengen nations in Europe, China, India and South Africa are among those who are also allowed in from Monday. Travel and aviation expert Sally Gethin has told GBNews this is a huge boost for the UK travel sector. Now, there are some flashing images in the next story we have for you. Investigations are underway after at least 8 people were killed and dozens injured at a Travis Scott festival in Texas. The rapper says he's absolutely devastated following the stampede. Sorry, we seem to be showing you the wrong pictures there. Back to the Travis Scott concert, however, the rapper says he's devastated following the stampede at the Astro World Music Festival in Houston on Friday. He was on stage when the crowd surged forward, which police are calling a mass casualty incident.
My fans really mean the world to me, and I always just really want to leave them with a positive experience. And anytime I can make out, anything that's going on, I stop the show and help them get the help they need, I could just never imagine the severity of the situation.
An Oxford professor says the government may need to step in over donations to universities from morally questionable sources. That comes after evidence emerged that top universities, including 2 Oxford colleges, accepted millions in donations from the Mosley family fortune. Lawrence Goldman, Emeritus Fellow at St Peter's College, accused Oxford of accepting tainted and dirty money. Well, Andrew Wigley, who researches trends in financial donations to universities, told GBNews some donations aren't necessarily philanthropic.
Universities have been at this for a long time, and I don't necessarily see a big problem about selling the assets, if you like, the names to different things. Where I think it is a bit more disappointing is the name. is on the side of the donor. I mean, if you really are interested in making a contribution and a selfless act of philanthropy, you wouldn't necessarily be looking to get some sort of name recognition out of it.
Sport Now and Aston Villa have sacked their manager Dean Smith after 3 years in charge. His side suffered a 5th consecutive Premier League defeat on Friday, losing 1-0 to Southampton at St Mary's. He guided the club back into the top flight in his first season in charge via the playoffs. The 50-year-old also led Villa to the League Cup final at Wembley in 2020, narrowly losing 2-1 to Man City. And the return of 4 SpaceX astronauts has been delayed again due to high winds off the coast of Florida. The US, French and Japanese crew have been in orbit now for 6 months. They were supposed to leave the International Space Station today and splash down in the Gulf of Mexico on Monday morning. That has now been delayed by 24 hours. The crew will also be making a return journey in nappies as the toilet in their capsule has broken. That's your news update. I'm back in half an hour.
Now, I like to think of myself as a pretty fair person. I try and take all factors of an argument into account and empathise with both sides. I'm definitely not afraid to take a hard decision, even if it's not the most popular view. And I have actually been known to change my mind and actually admit when I'm wrong. But on this matter, I don't think I am. For the most serious crimes, I absolutely believe in bringing back the death penalty. Take the case of NHS electrician David Fuller, a morgue monster who sexually abused 100 corpses, including 3 children, over a period of 12 years. He would apparently trawl through social media to find images of his victims. Detectives also found 4 million images of sexual abuse he had downloaded, along with footage that he'd filmed of himself carrying out attacks on the bodies of women at 2 hospitals in Kent where he worked. One mother was so incensed when she realised that he had violated her daughter, she went to the police station with a knife to, in her words, put it straight through his heart. He also pleaded guilty for the murders of Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce. The latter he was caught with the use of revolutionary DNA technique. For him, the death penalty would be the kindest thing to do. Now, I feel the same way about crimes committed in the manner with which Wayne Couzens killed Sarah Everard. He basically took advantage of his position of power and murdered her in a manner so chilling and one which any woman arrested on that same pretence would have fallen for. Then there's paedophile monsters like Richard Huckle, who was found dead in his cell at Full Sutton Prison in Yorkshire. In 2016, he was found guilty of abusing up to 200 children. He admitted offences against children aged between 6 months and 12 years. He even tried to make a business out of his horrific crimes by crowdfunding the release of the images. So where it is beyond any reasonable doubt that these monsters have committed the crime, surely it can be argued that this is the kindest outcome. Firstly, for the person themselves, who will be saved from the psychological torture and the risk of being killed by those inside. Secondly, for the family of the victim, whilst it won't bring their loved one back, it will be of some comfort that the perpetrator is unable to harm another. Then there's you and me, the taxpayers, who will no longer have to fund this individual. Now, before you take the moral high ground, bear this in mind. The last executions in the UK were only in 1964, so not that long ago. Peter Anthony Allen, who was hanged at Walton Prison in Liverpool, and Gwyn Owen Evans at Strangeways Prison in Manchester for the murder of John Allen West. And also that execution for high treason was only abolished in 1998. So where there's no hope of rehabilitation, and it is proven beyond a reasonable doubt for perpetrators of the most heinous crimes, should we bring back the death penalty? Right, so before we get on with the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For our Great British debate this hour, if there was an election tomorrow, would Labour win? The Conservatives have suffered a blow in the most recent rating polls, falling to within just 1 point ahead of Labour. Yesterday, Prime Minister Sir John Major launched a blistering attack on what he calls the shameful actions of Mr Johnson's government, arguing that they were perhaps politically corrupt. Now, each Sunday at 5 o'clock, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. And today I'm joined by former Liberal Democrat MP Sir Norman Lamb. We'll talk the highs and lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And we'll take a long look at what's making the headlines across the globe with friend of the show, Foreign Affairs correspondent James Marlowe. But as ever, this show is nothing without you. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Welcome back to my panel, broadcaster Danny Kelly and comedian Steve N. Allen. So, welcome. Good to see you, Steve. Haven't seen you for a while.
It's been a little while. Good to be back.
Nice to see you. So I'm going to start with you then. What do you think of the bringing back the death penalty?
Couldn't disagree with you more. Sorry to jump in and go full on it. It seems fundamentally flawed. State-sanctioned killing of a person to try and prove that killing is wrong is paradoxical. There's no evidence that it ever brings down rates of homicide, so it doesn't act as a deterrent. There are arguments about the cost, which actually seems like a really cheap argument to bring into it, but also if you look at the cost for finding someone guilty and executing them in America, it runs into the hundreds of millions. This is one of the reasons that New York and New Jersey got rid of the death penalty, was because of the cost. So it feels like, fundamentally, I would rather be on the side of history that says this is wrong to do.
So you think that the reason that I would want the death penalty is to show that they've made a mistake and that fundamentally killing is wrong? No, that's not my reasoning. My reasoning is because they will serve no purpose, in a sense, because they are going to be incarcerated, in which we will be paying for. Then they will never get out of jail. So what's the point? I don't think there's any point in it. Why should we be funding this? And I do actually think it's more expensive to keep someone in prison. I think it's about it's about 40 grand or something, or maybe something like that a week or a year or whatever. But it's too much. What do you think?
If this was a trial and you put together a very potent case for the prosecution, but part of your reasoning, Nana, was that you said if there's no chance of rehabilitation. So at what point do you determine that there is no chance of rehabilitation? You can't determine that at the trial, can you? Because rehabilitation can take a long time. It can take many, many years. So at what point do you determine that there is no chance of rehabilitation?
Well, I think, again, you have a jury, right? So you'd have a jury of people who would determine from what they've seen in terms of these crimes whether they believe this person will be able to be rehabilitated.
Well, they're not experts.
But the others...
though, are they?
Yeah, but you have to understand that there will be experts at that trial who will give information. And I ultimately think that the death penalty is actually it's a kinder thing to do than leaving this person to live. And, you know, actually, there was one case in America in particular where the guy actually said, look, the kindest thing to do would be to kill me.
Well, that's one guy.
Yeah, but that's one guy. But that is one case. It's still a case.
But since the 70s, there's been over 100 people in America who have then been found innocent after serving some time on death row. I'm sure they would say the kindest thing wouldn't have been to get this sorted years before.
Well, part of my argument is that you'd have to know they 100% did it. There's no, and with these ones and the ones I've highlighted, they are people who've actually put things, they've filmed themselves, they've actually got images of them doing it. And actually what tends to happen is they go to prison, they go to jail, and then they're usually killed by the prisoners in the prison.
Well,
so
that's not usually
killed.
In many cases for paedophilia, they can be killed in prison by those in prison.
Well, that's not usual, though, is it? I mean, it's a rare case.
So I'll take away the word usual. But in many cases, they are killed by those in prison, especially with things like paedophilia.
Well, I can't remember the last time there was a paedophile killed in prison. They're put in separate wings for their own protection. Well, so I can't... They're not in the general prison population, the nonces.
Well, the one I just mentioned, actually, he was killed and murdered in prison.
But that's not an argument for the death penalty. That's an argument to try and stop violence in prisons.
No, it's not an argument for that. I'm just saying that what often happens with paedophiles is that they are killed in prison by the inmates. My argument is that they should not... I would just execute them and get them, because I think it's a waste of money. They cannot be rehabilitated. We know from evidence that it's very difficult to rehabilitate a paedophile. There was an argument for castration, but even then it's been proven that that doesn't work. But there are certain crimes where I believe the death penalty...
But moving away from paedophilia, if a man violently rapes and then murders a woman, do you think that there is a possibility for that man to be rehabilitated? We have statistics to say it's difficult for paedophiles because they have their hardwiring all messed up.
Look, OK, so in this case, right, specifically, so I would go case by case. You couldn't have, all paedophiles, all this. It has to be case by case with everything. But in this instance, this person, he's a necrophiliac, so he's been, having sex with people who are no longer with us. He's also killed many people, and they're even saying they have no idea how many more he's killed. And he's been doing this for many, many, many years. This person is somebody who's proven to be guilty, and for somebody like that, I would absolutely say...
I wouldn't shed a tear if that lad was to be hung.
Say...
Wouldn't shed a tear.
But see, that's my point. For somebody like that, that's what... You couldn't have all murderers or all...
Where do you draw the line? What about drug dealers who blight communities and people overdose on the cheap heroin that they import?
No,
what about all of those tragic deaths?
I've given you the examples of where I would believe...
But I'm asking how far... So you draw a line
but
at paedophilia and murder?
You'd also have a jury, wouldn't you? So they would ascertain all the different elements of the case. So it wouldn't just be, oh, well, he's murdered this and he's murdered that. It'd have to be somebody who we really believe there is really no more hope for.
But the jury already has the bar to go over, which is that of beyond reasonable doubt. So already that is a test which sometimes fails. So in that moment, when the jury gives its decision, they think they've gone beyond reasonable doubt. But the fact that anyone has ever later been found innocent proves that you can't be sure that you've achieved beyond reasonable doubt.
I think you can in these cases.
With this
ones I've listed, I mean, come on. I've listed very specific cases. You know, if you want to muddy the waters and talk about cases where there's not enough evidence, no, absolutely not. You do not put the death penalty in a case where you don't have the information. That's ridiculous. But for the ones where you know they've actually got video footage, they've got images of what they've done, and it is really, it's so inhumane for them to have done those things and still literally appear to have no real empathy for their victims, then my worry is that people like this are beyond help and there's no purpose.
Is this a punishment or a deterrent? Because in
it's
America, as Stephen was saying, in America...
It's a bit of both, though. It depends how you view it. For somebody who may be prepared to commit some form of murder, who isn't really, you know, who's not all guns blazing, but is somebody who's prepared to commit murder, that might deter them. That could be a deterrent for somebody. But in the cases of these individuals, where the second individual that I spoke about, he was actually trying to crowdfund to sell his images.
Oh,
you know, for these kind of people, this is specifically these people. It cannot be just anybody who's committed murder.
Let me ask you a question. Wouldn't you rather they got a kicking in prison, though, behind bars? Wouldn't you rather that they were given kickings?
But which one is crueler? You see, that's the thing.
But why do you care if it's cruel on the paedophile?
Well, because, as I said it's to me, I think it's the kindest thing to do.
Don't be kind to them.
No, but you... But exactly. See, for me, I'm saying out of kindness, I would take these people out because they're only either going to harm somebody else. They are, as we've seen historically, in particular with paedophiles, they are beyond any sort of real rehabilitation.
Yeah.
So the kindest thing to do, in my eyes, would be that. But in yours, your kindest thing to do would be to let them stay in prison for years getting a kicking.
I'm suggesting that I'm not holding the interests of the paedophile. I don't care about their interests. I'm not thinking it would be kinder for them. I'm thinking that they're going to find out the hard way about how prison really is.
And also, this question is not about being kind to them or not. No one's disagreeing with the fact that these scum are scum. The question is, what benefits society more? And not having a death penalty seems like it benefits society more. There's no stats to say it acts as a deterrent. There's questions over the price.
I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you.
But you can't disagree with his statistics. In America, the prisons...
Let him speak. What statistics have you got?
In the fact that in America, the UN looked at it and there's no link between having a death penalty and reducing rates of...
Where is the statistics? So you're just saying that, but where is it?
Well, I found them on the internet when I Googled it before I came on just to find out what the figures are.
The
figures aren't in debate here.
Well, so they have death.
In certain states, they have death penalties.
Right. Yeah.
In those states, there is not a lower rate of homicide because of the death penalty. There are some states that have stopped having a death penalty, and you've not seen the homicide rate change because of the stopping of the death penalty. That's my statistics to say that actually it's not acting as a deterrent.
Well, it could be a psychological edge that they had the death penalty, and people still are deterred with that in their minds. You know. I don't see any proper hard fact statistics.
It still remains unproven that you can claim that it's a deterrent.
What do you need to do to prove? I mean, why? What is it that would prove?
If you're questioning my statistics, you're also not bringing any statistics to prove your point.
I've not brought statistics to the case.
I know.
I'm simply saying, from what I've seen, if it were me, I would bring back the death penalty. I'm not bringing in statistics. I've chosen specific incidents, specific crimes, and I said for these particular people, I would put the death penalty for them.
Yeah, and I'm saying that doesn't necessarily benefit society. One issue would be a deterrent.
How do you know? What statistics have you got for that?
It takes the ones I've just talked about.
Well, you haven't, because it just takes them out of the way.
America is full of prisons. Yeah. Sorry, America is full of prisons with prisoners on death row. Now, surely that's fairly compelling evidence.
Not really. Why
is that not compelling? Because there are thousands of people waiting to, if you like, be put down like animals. Now, they've committed murder.
They have behaved like animals.
So it would suggest to me that at the point of the murder, that deterrent that you think it could be wasn't in their minds.
Well, how do you know that it couldn't be a lot worse than that? You know, you're saying...
I don't.
Exactly, that's the point. It could be a lot worse.
But I think, on the balance of probability, if this was put in front of a jury, you know, you've got thousands of people on death row, and you ask a jury, do you think that the death penalty is a deterrent? On the balance of probability, I would suggest that out of those 12 men and women, they would say, well, it can't be a deterrent because there are thousands of people waiting to be killed.
Well, you don't know that. They might not say that.
But we're in a trial, though, aren't we?
You're saying they might say that.
Yes.
But perhaps they had that in their mind and actually tried to evade being caught because there's a death penalty. A lot of people will actually move states. So you'll commit crime in one state, you'll move another to another, or commit crime in the other state where there isn't a death penalty. So I don't necessarily agree.
A trial is all about trying to persuade a jury about your evidence. And I think that's fairly compelling evidence to suggest, generally speaking, the death penalty isn't a deterrent.
I just don't agree with you.
If you were right, wouldn't it mean that America has a lower rate of homicide than the UK because they have the death penalty and we don't?
Not necessarily. They have the right to bear arms, so they've got guns. So if somebody could take you out and take a load of people out with a machine gun, then I'd say you have to put those statistics into the whole thing that you're talking about as well.
It's one of the arguments against having the death penalty is because it brutalises society. Some people, I'm not necessarily saying I agree with these, say that because you then have the legal side of it, the law, the state that should be the highest standard, then is as brutal as the criminals, you perpetuate the idea that violence solves things.
I'm
not saying I believe that.
I depart from you at that point.
I don't agree with you at that point.
I depart.
I don't agree with you at all.
But you haven't even asked me if I think that we should have the death penalty.
Well, I was coming to you, but you never... Do you think we should have it? Do you think we should, though?
I'm going to say yes.
Exactly.
I'm going to say yes. Yeah, I'm going to say it now. Stephen's going to give me a right up.
No, well, it's all right. You can fight with me. I don't mind. I quite enjoy that.
I'll be sent down for it.
Yeah. But, yeah, I think there are certain cases where we should bring back the death penalty.
That's my argument.
But as a defence barrister, you're the prosecution, I was trying to undermine your arguments because we're in a court, if you like.
But it's not worked because you agree with me in the end.
We'll let the audience decide whether it's worked or not.
Yeah.
The prosecution barrister doesn't go, you're not working in the... You know, it's the jury that decides whether it's working.
Well, that's what I said before. That's what I was saying. It is the jury who would be given this evidence. But I think the option for the death penalty should exist, especially for the most heinous of crimes.
We agree.
That's what I'm saying. Right, so join us. It's getting fiery after the break. It's time for our Great British Debate. That wasn't it. That's coming up. And what we're looking at this because if there was an election tomorrow, would Labour win? That's the question. Boris Johnson has seen his poll rating slump. The gap between the Conservatives and Labour is just 1 point, supposedly. So this show is nothing without you. I want to hear your thoughts on that very subject. Send me an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think. You can also tweet me @gbnews. There's a poll right now asking you, if there was an election tomorrow, would Labour win? Cast that vote now. First, it's the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage. I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Right, so it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. Today, I'm asking, if there was an election tomorrow, would you vote Labour? There's no getting away from it. It's been a bruising week for the Tories. The party's been embroiled in a sleaze row, which started with its bid to change the rules on scrutinising standards for MPs. The Prime Minister was accused of pushing the vote through just to save Owen Paterson from lobbying punishment. And this morning, the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, has condemned Boris Johnson's actions.
What makes me most angry is the Prime Minister is trashing the reputation of our democracy and our country, and so this is far from a one-off and a U-turn, a bad week for the government. It's a pattern of behaviour by a Prime Minister who doesn't know how to uphold standards in public life.
Well, the events of this week have seen the Conservatives' lead against Labour in 2 national polls drop to just 1 point. So, if the Queen dissolved Parliament and we had a vote tomorrow, would the Labour Party be in with a chance of winning? Would you vote for them? Let's start by speaking to the chief political commentator at The Independent, John Rentoul. John, welcome to the programme. How would you...
Hi there.
Hiya. How would you sum up Boris Johnson's week?
He's had a shocking week. I think the polls have narrowed only marginally, but I think he's done himself some serious long-term damage. I think trying to overturn an independent decision that one of his MPs broke the rules on paid lobbying was a terrible mistake, and he admitted it by reversing position the next day and embarrassing his MPs. So not only did he make them look corrupt, he made himself look incompetent.
Well, I mean, come on, this is not the first time that he's done a U-turn on things. I mean, he's always doing it, so it shouldn't really be that much of a surprise that he's done it again. How much...
No, U-turns are a good thing.
Yeah, well, they are, aren't they? And the fact that he's...
Well, if you U-turn from a wrong position to a right position, exactly, then they're a good thing.
Well,
but people will remember what he tried to do. It's like that time when he tried to get out of the isolation rules after coming into contact with Sajid Javid. He and Rishi Sunak thought they would take advantage of some cockamamie pilot scheme, which didn't actually exist, I don't think. But then he had to back down within a few hours. He's done the same this time, but people remember what he was trying to do in the first place. He was trying to dodge the rules.
But these polls, though, I mean, I'm not convinced that the Labour Party are only 1 point ahead or behind. Do you really think that people are that bothered about it?
No, I mean, not most people, no, but I think there will be some people who will be disappointed. I think it will have some effect on undecided voters because I think Boris Johnson has done himself absolutely no favours with this one. He's been quite popular most of the year, which is surprising for a mid-term Prime Minister. To be fair, the next election's probably 2.5 years away, so it's probably pointless to speculate at all. But I think he's done himself harm. And if there were an election tomorrow, anything can happen. I mean, if you don't, are you saying you don't believe Labour's only 1 point behind? They're really about 20 points ahead.
No, I'm saying that I simply believe the Conservatives are way further ahead still. I don't think this is enough. I mean, there's the Labour MP who was, threatening to put acid on someone's face. I mean, there are so...
But she's not a Labour MP anymore. She got chucked out.
Well, she did get chucked out.
What matters... Yeah, but what matters in all this is how the party leader responded to bad behaviour. Boris Johnson tried to get Owen Paterson off. Keir Starmer kicked, what's her name, Claudia Webb, kicked her out of the party.
Yeah, I mean, that was the right thing to do, clearly. But it just seems that some of the politics, this seems like a bit of a Westminster bubble. Do you think eventually it will penetrate through and people will start to see the Conservatives as a sleaze party?
Yeah, I don't think it's a Westminster bubble story at all. I think, if you look at what people think of politicians is that they're all greedy, they're in it for themselves, they're selfish, they're unprincipled and all the rest of it. And what Boris Johnson has done is prove them right, especially about the Conservative Party. And I think people will notice the difference. I think people think that Keir Starmer, with his legal background, is straighter and more honest than Boris Johnson. And I think that will have an advantage for the Labour Party at the next election when it comes.
Well, listen, John, thank you so much for your thoughts. That's John Rentoul. He's the chief political commentator for The Independent. Right, so what do you think?
Well,
what do you think?
I disagree with the gentleman. I don't think anyone's going to vote for Labour because Sir Keir Starmer is a former barrister. I don't think that's in their mind when they're hovering over the ticket to actually put a cross next to the party. I think Boris Johnson reminds me of John Gotti, the Teflon Don, the mob of the Gambino family in New York. Teflon, nothing can stick to him. And he's going through all of these, mini crises. And I genuinely, again, that gentleman, I disagree with him. I don't think the average voter gives a damn about the sleaze. I think it is a Westminster bubble thing. I've driven down 95 miles from the West Midlands to come down to London today, and I can assure you, in my circle of friends and family, except for my hard left father, who was raising a fist and wanting to thump Boris Johnson at PMQs on Wednesday. No one cares about it.
But he didn't like Boris Johnson to begin with anyway, did he?
No, my dad's a Labour man.
Exactly.
My dad's a Labour man, and so there's this, and he's a Scouser like I am, so there's a natural sort of visceral hatred towards Conservatives, which I find rather sad, actually. There is a regional thing.
Yeah. OK, well, we'll discuss more after the break. We'll continue with our debate. So the question is, if there was an election tomorrow, would you vote Labour? You'll hear my panel's view and also a chance for your say. You can vote on our Twitter poll now. Let us know what you think. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, let's get your latest headlines.
Good afternoon, I'm Polly Middlehurst and here are your latest news headlines. Sir Keir Starmer says the country's reputation is being trashed by the Prime Minister. It's after the government tried to prevent the former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson's suspension for breaching lobbying rules. Parliament is due to hold an emergency debate on standards tomorrow. Over 10 million people have now had their COVID-19 booster jabs in the UK. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, is urging the elderly and vulnerable to get theirs to help avoid restrictions over Christmas. More than 50 million first-dose vaccines have been delivered in the UK. The US is reopening its borders to UK visitors who are fully vaccinated against COVID tomorrow. Travellers from Ireland and the 26 Schengen nations in Europe, China, India and South Africa are among those also allowed in on Monday. And Aston Villa have sacked their manager Dean Smith after 3 years in charge. His side suffered a fifth successive Premier League defeat on Friday, losing 1-0 to Southampton at St Mary's. He guided the club back into the top flight in his first session in charge via the playoffs. The 50-year-old also led Villa to the League Cup final at Wembley in 2020, narrowly losing 2-1 to Man City. That's it from me. I'm back in half an hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
So welcome back. It's time to continue with our Great British Debate. We're asking, if there was an election tomorrow, would you vote Labour? 2 national opinion polls have cut the gap between the Conservatives and Labour to just 1 point. Let's get my panel's take on it. Steve and Danny, let's come to Steve because Danny had his little bit of a tinwag earlier. What do you think?
I think the poll probably doesn't just look at the Sleaze side of it. We've not too long ago had a budget. People are going to feel an impact of where the money's gone, where it's been taken from. So that will be feeding into that particular result. I think that it's an interesting argument about whether it's a Westminster bubble thing or not. I think the details of it, if you find someone in a pub and say, do you want to get into the ins and outs of the lobbying rules? Snooze fest.
Yeah, no one's interested.
But if you get the word sleaze, if there's one rule you've got as the Conservative Party, it's don't let the word sleaze be synonymous with you again, because it went so badly last time. You know, the John Major era, it became synonymous. You didn't even have to think of the details, and that's the only thing that could puncture them under the Plimsoll line. That would cause them some cost. The same thing can happen with Labour.
Well, it's happened to them. They've got the anti-Semitism thing.
Anti-Semitism, and also
label.
looking like they're terrible with the economy. That's like goal one. Don't make it look like you're terrible with the economy, because it's so sticky as a message, and sleaze is sticky when it comes to the Conservatives. So I do think this will have an impact, but no one cares about the details, just the big, no one likes the idea of privileged people trousering some money.
Well, I don't know. I mean, look, sleaze is one thing, but then when you talk about the economy, that's relatable, and people then look at it and think, well, hang on, Labour aren't going to handle the economy as well as I would like. I'd rather tolerate a bit of sleaze, because actually, if I was in their shoes, I might do something similar.
Yeah, and also the guy from The Independent, we need to understand he's heavily partial with this. The jokingly titled Independents, you know, they're very anti-Conservatives. Labour, and when he defended, you know, he didn't defend, he clarified the title of the woman who threatened to throw acid, Claudia Webb. But when the gavel went down in that courtroom, she was a Labour MP. OK, so don't defend her. She was a Labour MP when the gavel went down. Right. And he was quick to sort of distance the party from that. And I think that's significant. You've also got the Coventry South MP, who's had to apologise today. She's a Corbyniste, a hard left, for being associated with a group that claims that all police are assassins. She's had to publicly apologise. And also you've got Keith Vaz making a return to politics, possibly with the Labour Party. Don't forget, involved with the Rent Boy scandal and drugs. So let's not kid ourselves that it's just the Conservatives.
Well, we don't know any of those.
No, they're all in the public domain.
All in the public domain.
But to make it more to debate on that point, it would be, has Keir Starmer then tried to change rules to mean that all of these people you just mentioned could potentially have another go at an appeal to clear their name when they've just argued about it? That's the issue here. It's deciding to have a crack at and then changing your mind the next day. Changing the rules retrospectively. Well, that's what looks dodgy.
Well, Boris Johnson he's often trying to protect his people, isn't he? And Matt Hancock, he didn't sack him straight away and gave him a bit of time to do what he had to do, and then eventually realised the pressure was too much. He is notorious for trying to sort of protect his people, which is slightly commendable in some respect, but on these particular occasions it's not so great because it's ultimately sleaze. But then who hasn't got their fingers in the trough? I mean, literally across the party network, there are different members doing different things that would be seen as sleaze.
Yeah, and the average punter in the street unfortunately will say, well, they're all the same, and that's just such an ignorant position because there are so many good, hard-working, honest MPs with 100% integrity. And let's not forget, the alternative is Sir Keir Starmer. And people will associate Sir Keir Starmer, and also that title, I don't think does him any favours with working-class people, with taking the knee during the Black Lives Matter summer. You know, that is indelibly imprinted on a lot of people's minds about Keir Starmer taking the knee in a very palatial, plush office somewhere with his wife beside him. And I think that's not a positive, I think that's a negative.
I still think if it weren't for this bout of corruption and sleaze, then that poll would have been different. They still would have been further ahead. So that's indicative that this is making a difference, that people don't like the taste of it. Not the details, but the taste of it.
Nobody likes the taste of it, but I don't really think that it would affect people's vote because it doesn't directly affect them. So it's more to do with what's the policy, what does that have an effect on me? What do I care that he borrowed some money or he didn't borrow some money for wallpaper at number 10? And I'm sorry, but this is totally... If I were in the same position and I could sort of do this and that, I might try to do whatever he did. I don't believe... People are real about this. And I'm sure... I think a lot of working class people haven't forgiven the Labour Party for almost disappearing when it came to Brexit and not supporting their interests and not supporting the working class. So now, when it comes to it, they're looking at the Conservative Party and saying, well, at least they were looking after my interests.
You want a party that is going to bat for you and be on your team, which I think, because, you know, from Mansfield, that red wall area, I know exactly that kind of... we always thought the Labour Party would be backing us. There are questions over that now. But I tell you what, when you find out that someone is starting to get into corruption and sleaze, they're not on your team anymore. They're very much team them. And if the Conservative Party lose that sense that people from the red wall can think, hang on, they might have been on my team if they're suddenly not on your team, all of a sudden, you know, there are some... You run out of reasons to change your vote.
What about local MPs, though? So, for example, someone like Sir David Amos, you know, bless him, he's no longer with us, but he was somebody who everybody loved, you see. So it was not party political as to whether he was elected or not. And there are, as Danny said, lots of really hard-working MPs who are from the Conservative Party, who those who voted for them respect. So whatever Boris Johnson does doesn't really have an impact on where they're going to vote.
Nana, don't forget, and Stephen's right, because Mansfield is a tough mining area, isn't it? And Boris Johnson pleaded with the red wall areas. He actually said, lend me your vote.
Right.
OK? And see how I get on. So you had people, and again, it's a regional thing. I come from a city, Liverpool, where, generally speaking, people loathe Conservatives for some crazy reason. It's just the way that they're hardwired. It's almost like an indoctrination process. You vote Labour, you must vote Labour, your granddad voted Labour.
It's a bit like in Scotland, where they hate the Conservatives, again, the same
Yeah,
thing.
that's right. So these are people who lent their vote to the Conservatives. So I think Stephen has hit on something really interesting, because it was only ever a borrowed vote. These are hardcore working-class people who generationally vote Labour. So I'm starting to be conflicted slightly about whether that poll could actually be accurate.
I think the problem here is the failure of Labour. So if they were stronger, if they had better representation, you know, Angela Rayner, using the word she did, she has backtracked and apologised, which she should.
Oh, yeah.
People don't want to hear their MPs and people in power speaking in that way. So the problem here is the failure of the Labour Party. Keir Starmer, Sir Keir Starmer, as you pointed out, Danny, this is not relatable to the working class. And I don't think he comes across in a way that is relatable to those who would, you know, predominantly have voted
The
Labour.
alternative, though, who else would run for Labour leader? You've got the Mayor of Manchester, a Scouser,
now, I think
Andy Burnham.
He would be someone who they would relate to.
Yeah,
I think he could make a change.
But you'd need to be an MP. He's not even an MP. He's a Metro Mayor of Manchester.
Well, what if they changed the rules so that he could be? Then would that be OK?
Well, that's a whole different discussion
because
about
we're doing
constitutional...
the changing the rules thing again.
Constitutional...
So yeah.
Although you just wait for a by-election in a safe seat, or you'd force one and you could get him in. I mean, but I do like the idea of, is it OK to change rules when it benefits your
Exactly, that's right,
And they all would do it. So that's why this whole row about sleaze is actually... You know, if we were all put in the positions that these people have been put in, we would probably behave in the same way. A bit like my favourite film, Trading Places. You ever seen that film?
Yeah, with Eddie Murphy.
Oh, that's so good.
But it's not true that all MPs are in it for the maximum amount of what they can get away with it. So it's not true to say we'd all do it. Clearly, there are some MPs who don't try and bend the line as far as they can get away with. Some people actually have standards and a moral fibre that stops them trying to bend.
We might all try and protect our friends, though. So, you know, what Boris was doing was ultimately trying to keep his friend in a position. But, you know...
That's more important, though.
But the point that I'm making is that when I said that most of us would try and behave in a similar way, we might do. We might behave in that. It's not so ridiculous that we might not consider to try and do that to protect those people who work around us, which is what Boris did, but it doesn't really work well in the real world. Let's find out what other people are saying, because you've heard from my guests and the panel. Now it's time to hear what you're saying, and lots of you have actually been getting in touch with your views. Jack says, define win. Most seats, not a chance, as long as the SNP are running Scotland. To form Her Majesty's government, a fighting chance with other parties in a coalition. Alan says, if, and it's a big if, all the parties wanted the Tories out badly enough, they'd agree not to stand against each other in safe Tory seats and stand one candidate of whichever party is closest to topping them and ask their supporters to vote for them. Won't happen, though. Yeah, I don't really like that, though, because it's almost as though they are telling us how things should be and they should allow the people to vote. Paddy says, not on your Nelly. Tim says the Greens have more of a chance of winning than Labour. Yeah, it's true. Another Keith says, not until they have a proper leader like Andy Burnham. Yeah, we did think that would be a good choice for them. Robert says, no, but the data would show that Labour has definitely gained some ground. I don't necessarily think this is because they have done anything particularly right, but rather because the Conservatives have been increasingly bad since the last election. There's also a poll up on Twitter today throughout the show asking that very question. If there was an election tomorrow, would you vote Labour? Would Labour win? Currently, 6.6% of you say yes. And 93.4% of you say that Labour would not win. You see, and that's interesting. See, so that's what our panel think. They're sort of inclined to believe that they won't win. I don't think they will either. Do you think they would win?
Really interesting point about how our first-past-the-post system with the number of seats that in Scotland we know will go SNP. Really good point. So if you're adding that in, then those stats look believable. I mean, will there ever be a Labour government, or will it have to be through coalition? That's a real good point.
I don't think that they would win. I don't hold to what you smile.
Because I'm laughing.
I don't hold to. I don't think that poll asking GB News viewers about whether Labour would win, I'm not sure that that is probably representative of, for example, is it a Maury something poll or whatever? You know, yeah, that's it. Because you're asking GB News viewers, and why not? They're right leaning, and that's brilliant.
Yeah, but
I don't think, as long as they've got a leader who takes the knee, I don't think that they're electable.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's just down to that. I hear you, but I don't think it's just down to that. There are so many other variables, and one of them is that they are unrepresentative of what they represent. So a Labour Party, we are thinking more working class. We're thinking a party who is going to represent the interests of people who are within that, but yet they appear to be a more London-centric party full of very middle-class, elite individuals. And that is totally unrelatable and totally undistinguishable to what they represented to begin with. They do not look like Labour, as far as...
Yeah, but that's because of Keir Starmer, I think. Well, if Andy Burnham was the MP...
Yeah, but he could change the face of the party.
The party leader.
But...
I think you're right. There are two Labour parties, effectively, the Islington and the Mansfield, and they need to work out how to fit these people together. We are very different. You know, I'm from an area where we don't know that it's not pronounced quinoa, to be brutally honest about it.
It's quinoa, darling.
There you go.
I only found it about 3 years ago. I've never eaten it before.
Don't even know what it is.
It's some sort of legume or grain or whatever.
But to get those groups of people together is the main job of the Labour Party, and they need to be working harder to make that happen.
Well, we shall see now. Stay with us, because after the break it's time to take a look at what's making the headlines around the world. This man is at the forefront. What's next for US President Joe Biden's Democrats after they lost the state of Virginia? I'll be joined by friend of the show, Foreign Affairs expert James Marlowe. But first, let's have a look at the weather.
Dry and chilly with clear spells for most, windy in the northeast. For southwest England tonight, it will continue to be dry across the region with clear spells, though it will feel chillier than recent evenings, dropping to single figures. For southeast England, it will be a dry evening with some clear spells across the area. Temperatures will drop in more rural places. Similarly, for South Wales, a dry evening with long-lived clear spells, but feeling colder than of late with some misty patches. Across the Midlands, it will be a dry evening, though there will be a little more cloud around at times. Here, temperatures will drop off to a low of 7 degrees. Further north and east, it will remain breezy this evening, but it'll be dry and clear. It will be chilly here as well, though milder along the coast. Elsewhere in South Scotland, the winds will start to ease this evening. It will be dry with clear skies at times. Feeling a little bit cold here too, with a rural frost expected. For Northern Ireland, it'll be cold and clear this evening too, but through the night it will turn breezier, milder, and cloudier from the west by the morning. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me live from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Your weekend starts here. My show exists to do 3 things: to inform, to debate and to entertain. Big guests, big stories and big opinions. And I can't do any of it without you. It's lively and it's a little bit funny. So join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
So good afternoon. Now, it's that time of the show where we take a look at what's been going on around the world and reflect on how it affects us here in the UK. So let's speak to my foreign affairs expert, James Marlowe. James, great to see you.
Thank you.
Right.
Good to see you.
Yes, now, there's so much going on. Joe Biden, what is happening? America, Democrats.
Well, he's had a success. And the success occurred on Friday night. He had a press conference with a Q&A yesterday. I listened to most of it, if not all of it, this morning. And the success is based on the infrastructure bill, which he got passed bipartisan. So in other words, the Republicans and the Democrats both voted for this particular bill, which is specifically for the infrastructure of America. He's known now as the FDR, the New Deal, which he wants to create brand new jobs and electric cars and new roads and a whole infrastructure which is going to create millions and millions of jobs. The problem that the Democrats always had was that they've got a hardcore of far left socialists within the party right now, which is turning off some Democrats. They're known as the Squad. They're led by somebody called AOC. and they are voting against all the Democrat bills. You can't reason with them. This is not me, this is the Democrats. The Democrats are saying this. The reason why you can't reason with them is because that they want taxes raised to everyone. Now, Joe Biden says that the rich should pay more, but everyone else is going to be fine. Where Joe Biden is going to struggle is the next bill which is coming up, which is actually known as Build Back Better.
Right, yes.
And that's the one that they're going to struggle with because it's not clear whether the Republicans are going to support that one or not. But basically, this comes after the Republicans had an amazing victory a couple of days ago in the state of Virginia, the first time that the Republicans have won in the state of Virginia for 12 years. And of course, Mr. Glenn Youngkin won that state. We've been talking about it for the last 2 weeks over here. So we were kind of predicting that he might just take that state, and he did with a much greater majority than we expected because the Democrats were not coming out to vote because they're not happy with the party. What we didn't expect was the state of New Jersey. That was so close. It was actually between the Republican and the Democrat, which was changing. It was seesawing all night and into the next day as well. The final result was not announced until 2 days later. And of course, the Democrats just picked it up, 50% against 48%. So it was just in, but it would have been an absolute devastation for the Democrat Party had the Republicans taken that state.
Wow, so it's really kicking off in America, isn't it? We'll be finding out, because I don't think he may have got this FDO thing, but I'm not convinced that he'll be able to still maintain his lead against the Republicans. I think this is a
He wasn't, as I watched the press conference this morning, which was from yesterday as well, he made a number, in my opinion, he made a number of Donald Trump mistakes. In other words, he was going over things again and again. He was contradicting himself. He was saying that this is going to be great. He wasn't so good in the Q&As. He was going off on a tangent as well. And unfortunately, this is the complaint from general American voters, is that their candidates are not of higher quality, not like they used to be. But again,
Not like they used to be. They had Ronald Reagan in there, they had an actor. But then he turned out to be one of their best presidents ever.
Absolutely.
Right, so
Yes.
now what's the story about the Taliban disguising themselves?
Yes, Afghan women. They have the Afghan women who have previously worked for international aid agencies and NGOs, and of course Western governments. They were receiving a number of messages, mostly via WhatsApp, hundreds and hundreds of messages to say that we are an independent NGO, we have offices in Washington, D.C., we know you're looking for a way out of the country, we want to get you out of the country, and they're luring them into an office whereby these women are being executed.
Really?
In the last few days, 7 women's bodies have been found. This is happening at this time by the Taliban in the north of the country, and there are perhaps other women's bodies who have not yet been found. I was listening to some testimony late last night, from an Afghan woman who used to work for one of the NGOs. She's receiving, she claims, hundreds of WhatsApp messages over the last several weeks. She knows it's a con. She knew at least one of these women whose body has been found. And the WhatsApp messages to say, you are in danger, the Taliban is after you, you need to come to us, but first make sure that you send your documents, your picture, your passport number, your date of birth, so that they know exactly who they are. And once they get to this office, of course, that they are killed and their bodies are being dumped. So this comes in contrast to what the Taliban said to Western governments, to say, don't worry, everything is going to be fine. And it's not fine. They are rounding up these women. Elsewhere, by the way, on the Afghan streets, let me just tell you this very briefly, shops are open, but they used to have music playing in the shops, and there used to be some musicians in the, that's not allowed anymore, so the Taliban have completely wiped that out. There's no music at all in the marketplaces. Those musicians who used to play as a musician, and they can't do anything else, they're out of work, of course. The other thing as well is that the Taliban have clamped down on a hobby in Afghanistan, which is flying birds or pigeon flyings. And they say that that's un-Islamic, and they completely ban that. Coffee shops have now reopened. They're not to their high capacity because women are not going out to the coffee shops for obvious reasons, because the women are scared to go out and sit and have a cappuccino. However, the Taliban are sitting down and they're talking about the word cappuccino. They've never been introduced to the word cappuccino before, and they are saying that this is the greatest thing ever.
Wow.
So that's happening in Afghanistan. And if I can just briefly move to Iran, if you allow me to, and that links in a little bit with Joe Biden and the Americans, because what a lot are fearing at this point is that Joe Biden is desperate for another success. He had this success with the bill, as we just mentioned, on Friday night. He's looking to get another bill passed, but he also believes that he can have a major success if he can get a specific deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, the problem with Iran is that it's enriching uranium to a very high degree. Even according to the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, it's way above 60%. Well, it is 60%, but others have said it's above 60%. That is close to weapons production, which means their quest for nuclear weapons. And this is a great concern to the West. And the question remains, just to end, is Joe Biden is going to sit down with the Iranians on November the 29th, that the Iranians claim that they're going to sit down with the Americans, or is Joe Biden going to put it off a little bit and listen to the Israelis and the Saudis and the Gulf states?
Good question. Well, we'll find out, won't we? James, thank you so much for talking to us. That's James Marlowe, our Foreign Affairs correspondent. Interesting stuff. If you just tuned in, you're watching me, Nana Akua. This is GB News. So, good afternoon. It's just gone 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua, and for this hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines. Now, the show is about opinion. It's yours, it's mine, and it's theirs. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's broadcaster Danny Kelly and comedian Steve N. Allen. Still to come, each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. Today, I'm going to be speaking to former Liberal Democrat MP Sir Norman Lamb. We'll talk the highs and lows, the lessons learned, and what comes next on the outside. The Great British Debate this hour, are you confident in sharing your true opinions? TV presenter Holly Willoughby says that she waters down her opinions in a bid to swerve cancel culture. So I want to know, do you feel confident showing your true thoughts in public? Email address as ever, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. But first, let's get your latest headlines.
Your GB News headlines at 5 o'clock. I'm Polly Middlehurst. Over 10 million people have now had their COVID-19 booster jabs in the UK. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, is urging the elderly and vulnerable to get theirs to avoid restrictions over Christmas. More than 50 million first-dose vaccines have been delivered now in the UK. Sir Keir Starmer says the reputation of the country and its democracy is being trashed by the Prime Minister. That comes after the government tried to prevent the former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson's suspension for breaching lobbying rules. Parliament is due to hold an emergency debate on standards tomorrow. The Sun's associate editor, Trevor Kavanagh, told GB News the Prime Minister will survive this criticism.
I think that Boris will go through a very rough time tomorrow in Parliament, and will get a kicking, and he will take it probably with his usual rueful smile. And to be honest, I think that no matter how big this seems at the moment, this will pale into the distance as other events unfold in the coming weeks and months. And I don't think, actually, that this particular event will have any impact on the next election.
The United States is reopening its borders to UK visitors who are fully vaccinated against COVID from tomorrow. The country's been closed since early 2020 due to the pandemic. Travellers from Ireland and the 26 Schengen nations in Europe, China, India and South Africa are among those also allowed in from tomorrow. Travel and aviation expert Sally Gethin has told GB News this is a huge boost for the UK travel sector.
The fact that the USA is opening up really is a step towards the world unlocking. I mean, obviously, it affects many citizens from other countries who are fully vaccinated, who can also enter the USA. But the UK accounts for the most arrivals into the United States every year. Before the pandemic, it was 4.8 million. We are their top market.
In the United States, investigations are underway after at least 8 people were killed and dozens more injured at a Travis Scott festival in Texas. There are flashing images in the next few pictures. The rapper involved says he's absolutely devastated following the stampede at his Astroworld Music Festival in Houston on Friday. He was on stage when the crowd surged forward, which police are calling a mass casualty incident.
My fans really mean the world to me, and I always just really want to leave them with a positive experience. And anytime I can make out, anything that's going on, I stop the show and, help them get the help they need, I could just never imagine the severity of the situation.
The Environment Secretary says the government is considering taxing imports from countries with poor environmental records. The so-called carbon border tax would attempt to reduce pollution and help businesses protect their green status. George Eustace insists the possible move wouldn't increase prices on food, but he says the levy would take several years to ramp in. National trust organisations worldwide are calling for a ban on the use of peat in compost as part of efforts to tackle climate change. The charity says healthy peatlands act as carbon sinks, which absorb carbon from the atmosphere. They also help control flooding and provide a home for wildlife. National Trust Director General Hilary McGrady says the government must step up and play their part. Sport now, and Aston Villa have sacked their manager Dean Smith after 3 years at the helm. His side suffered a 5th successive Premier League defeat on Friday, losing 1-0 to Southampton at St Mary's. He did, though, guide the club back into the top flight in his first season in charge via the playoffs, and the 50-year-old also led Villa to the League Cup final at Wembley in 2020, narrowly losing 2-1 to Man City. And lastly, the return of 4 SpaceX astronauts has been delayed due to high winds off the Florida coast. The US, French and Japanese crew have been in orbit for 6 months. They were supposed to leave the International Space Station today and splash down in the Gulf of Mexico on Monday morning. That's now been delayed by another 24 hours. And the crew will also be making the return journey, as we're told, in nappies, as the toilet in their capsule has broken. That's all from me. I'm back in half an hour.
Good afternoon. First up this hour, I'm talking about Parliament and someone that used to sit in it. Cast your mind back to 2010 and you'll remember when the Conservatives teamed up with the Liberal Democrats. The coalition government was the first since the Second World War and gave loads of Liberal politicians the chance to showcase their talents in government. One was the Liberal Democrat MP for Norfolk North, Norman Lamb, who served as Minister of State for Care and Support from 2012 until the end of the coalition in 2015. He stood to be leader of the party in 2015, losing out to Tim Farron. And I'm very pleased to say that Sir Norman joins me live from Norfolk. Welcome to the programme, Norman. Thank you for joining me. Now, I wanted to ask...
Very good to be with you.
I noticed that you grew up in Watford, which is a place that's very dear to my heart. Tell me a bit more about your upbringing and what kind of made you want to get into politics.
Well, I was born in Watford. You're absolutely right. We lived in Radlett, but family moved when I was only 2, so I can't really claim any great association with Watford. We moved to Guildford in Surrey. My dad was a meteorologist with the Met Office, Meteorological Office, government service, and then actually subsequently set up the Climatic Research Unit at the University of East Anglia, which you might have noticed has been in the news. It was the place where the emails were leaked just before the Copenhagen climate summit back in, I think, about 2006. He had by that stage died, but he set it all up, and he was a world-renowned climate scientist, and that's actually what brought us to Norfolk. And I became a lawyer. I worked as a solicitor, a partner of a law firm in Norfolk, and then stood for Parliament, getting elected finally after 11 years of trying in 2001.
Well, Norfolk is absolutely lovely. North is one of those places that you go and then you just literally do not want to leave. It's such a stunning place, isn't it? I mean, talk to me a bit more.
It's magnificent.
Yeah, it is. It's a stunning place, isn't it? Most people who go there just simply don't want to leave it. Tell me a little bit more about the 2010 election and the decision to team up with the Conservatives. What did you think about that? Do you feel that was the right choice?
Yeah, I mean, it's of course the party, the Lib Dems, were condemned by very many people for entering coalition with the Conservatives. I continue to assert that it was the right decision to take. The country was in a difficult position. It was in the aftermath of the crash in 2008. There were significant economic challenges, a massive deficit, and I think the responsible thing to do when no party had a majority in Parliament was to seek to agree a programme with the largest party, which happened to be the Conservatives. Now, obviously, there were significant differences between the two parties, but actually, it's what happens in most European countries. Parties in systems that often are proportional, where that often no party has an overall majority. Coalitions are commonplace. It's not usual in this country. It was the first coalition in the post-war period, but I think it was the responsible thing to do. And I think if we walked away from it, we would have flunked our responsibility. Now, it led to us alienating many of our natural supporters, and it was a crushing challenge for the party. And the party was, I think, it came close to destruction. We lost most of our seats, left with just 9 seats in 2015. So I think we always felt that this was a massive experiment. Could a small party enter a coalition in this country under the voting system we've got and survive? And the answer was almost no, it couldn't. But despite that, I continue to believe that we did the right thing. And I think, although we made significant mistakes and the whole issue of student tuition fees cost us dearly, I also think we did some very good things in government, and I think we punched above our weight. And I think we actually had some extremely impressive ministers as part of that government who, achieved significant policy advances in the areas that they were responsible for.
Do you think that the party could ever recover from that? Because that was quite a blow, wasn't it? There was, as you said, the whole student loan debacle, which sort of saw the Liberal Democrats backtrack. And then, of course, there was the coalition where you lost a lot of your heartland support because you were suddenly teaming up with the Conservatives. And now the Liberal Democrats, where are they? What are they doing? I don't really hear much from them.
Well, I should say, Nana, that I've actually stepped back from politics and I'm no longer a member of the party. I chair an NHS mental health trust, and I felt it was appropriate not to continue to be involved in politics, but I, of course, remain interested. So the party, is in a much diminished state. I think it's important for the country to have an alternative to the two main parties, but I think it will take some time for it to find a route back to relevance and to any possibility of power. However, politics, I think, is volatile, and I don't think you can rule out a point coming at some point in the future where people tire of this government. It's what happens after years in power. And when that moment comes, then if the party can, in a sense, offer the country a coherent message, what it stands for, what its vision is for our country, then there is a chance again that it could win seats and potentially share power again. The idea of it governing on its own is for the birds for the moment, but sharing power becomes a possibility at a time when people tire of this government, which is something that always happens in democracies.
Now, you were made Minister of State for Care, weren't you, in 2012? And the role you're currently doing now, is that kind of linked because of your background in healthcare?
It is, yeah. In my time in Parliament, I became increasingly focused on issues relating to mental health. We had our own family experiences of mental health, like most families, of course, across our country. It hadn't had the attention I don't think it deserves. There wasn't a sense that, people with mental ill health were treated equally. Under the previous Labour government, they had introduced maximum waiting time standards into the NHS, the 4-hour A&E standard, the cancer waiting time standard, that if you have suspected cancer, you'll see a specialist within 2 weeks and you'll have your operation within a defined number of days. These were all good things, but they left out mental health. And so there was this awful sense that mental health was the Cinderella service. It was the forgotten part of the NHS. And I found myself advocating for mental health within government, arguing the case that there should be equality, equal treatment between physical health and mental health. And so when I chose in 2019 to stand down from Parliament, the idea of working in the NHS, chairing a mental health trust, was very appealing. It's an opportunity to make a difference to people's lives. And I have a very, strongly held view that we need to intervene earlier to support people at an earlier stage to stop health deteriorating, to give people the chance of a good life that perhaps the rest of us take for granted, and to lock up fewer people. Our system of mental health care detains very many people under the Mental Health Act in a way that I think sometimes breaches their human rights. So I think, this is a job, a role that invigorates me and excites me and gives an opportunity to make a difference on the ground.
Now, I know that obviously you try and all the things you're doing are looking after the quality of people's lives as well, but you also advocate for reform of drug and assisted dying, the law that surrounds that. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, I feel very strongly that at the end of the day, it should be our decision about our own lives rather than the state's decision. And I had always voted in Parliament whenever I had the opportunity to introduce laws to provide for assisted dying. It's, of course, really important that there are real safeguards in place to avoid families exploiting vulnerable loved ones. But I think the fundamental right that we all have is that if we're dying, if we have some sort of terminal illness, we should be able to make a decision ourselves to end our lives at a time of our choosing, rather than suffering sometimes horrific pain at the end of our life. Give people the opportunity to die in dignity at a time of their own choosing. And the thing that I find really fascinating is that there is massive public support for reform. Every opinion poll that's carried out shows across the political spectrum very high levels of support for introducing laws to provide for assisted dying. And yet successive governments refuse to legislate for this. And Parliament itself, members of Parliament themselves, I think, are also behind public opinion on this and have refused to reform the law. The lobby in Parliament of MPs that have faith, and faith of course that I fully respect, but I think it often leads to members of Parliament voting against reform. For me, if someone of faith objects, that is absolutely their right, but it shouldn't stop other people exercising what I think is their right to end their life if they face a terminal illness.
Yeah, it's interesting that we're able to sort of understand that when it comes to animals, but for humans, we seem to struggle with that. I mean, I know that you had a stroke in 2018, and then, of course, you left sort of politics, the big scene. So what are you up to now? Give us a brief summary of what you're doing now and whether you actually miss being in politics in the way you were.
So yes, I had a wake-up call in 2018. I woke with double vision. It lasted about 40 minutes, and it was very shocking to be told the next day after an MRI scan that it was a very minor stroke. Now, I think the truth is that I had been pushing myself probably a bit beyond the limit. You know, the public's view of politicians is often a fairly negative one, but there are many politicians across the political spectrum who work extraordinarily hard and are dedicated to what they're trying to do for the public good as they see it. Now, I, for a period of 18 and a half years in Parliament, had been working fairly ludicrous hours. I was deeply committed to trying to represent my constituency in the way that I felt was appropriate, supporting people, constituents in their hour of need in all sorts of different circumstances. But it, I think, took its toll. So for that and for other reasons, I had disagreed with my party over how we responded to Brexit. I felt that we had to accept the result and to negotiate a deal that brought the country together. And that left me feeling quite isolated within my parliamentary party. So I decided to step down at the 2019 election. I now, as I said earlier, chair a mental health trust in the NHS. I also chair the Children and Young People's Mental Health Coalition, which is a coalition of a whole load of charitable organisations working in children's mental health. And I chair an advisory board for a digital mental health company, which is a really interesting area. This is a way of supporting people with their mental ill health by digital means, access through your mobile phone to counselling, to moderated chat rooms where you can talk to others who may be experiencing similar issues as yourself, and then access to a whole load of information and advice and guidance about how you can help yourself. So that's a really interesting role as well. And we set up our own mental health fund in my county of Norfolk, myself and my wife Mary, and that gives money to small grassroots organisations working in children's mental health. So with all of that, I keep myself pretty busy, but I have reclaimed my weekends.
Wow.
Apart from that is Nana speaking to you.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. Wow, you're still really busy doing stuff. It's really lovely to talk to you. Don't wear yourself out and enjoy Norfolk. I don't blame you. That's Norman Lamb. He was the former Liberal Democrat MP and Minister of State for Care and Support. Well, don't go anywhere because still to come, our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, are you confident in sharing your true opinions? TV star Holly Willoughby has admitted that she avoids saying what she really thinks when on air to avoid cancel culture. We'll discuss that next.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good afternoon. Right, it's time for our great British debate this hour. I'm asking you this: are you confident in sharing your true opinions? TV presenter Holly Willoughby has admitted that she waters down her true views to avoid cancel culture. Nothing that I can say that I'm not. I'm certainly not like that. It was having so much trouble. In her book, she says, to fit in with other people's expectations of me, I've ended up simplifying myself. So today, let's discuss whether it's right to share your true feelings, and are you confident in doing so? I'm joined by my panel, Danny Kelly, and also Steve N. Allen. But I'm also joined for this debate by comedian Dave Chalmer. Hello, Dave.
Hello.
Oh, you're
Lovely
all
to be
right.
back. I'm very well. How are you?
Good. Yes, I'm fine, thank you. Yes. Now, so what do you think about all of this then? Holly Willoughby says she waters down herself.
Yeah. I mean, if the more uncharitable people have sort of said, if Holly Willoughby has to simplify herself, then that's, you know, I didn't say that. A lot of people have said that. I think, doesn't everyone do this? Like, if you go to a dinner party, you don't just like let loose. And essentially, she's a TV presenter. This is her job. Of course, we all have to meter ourselves at work. I don't see why this is a problem.
But I think what she's saying, because if you imagine, everyone's got an expectation of her, haven't they? Because she's on programmes, on TV. People expect her to be a certain way. If she says anything slightly out or what they, you know, sometimes you can say something, people completely misinterpret it. I mean, I've done that plenty of times. Then people misinterpret it, then they run with their own imagination, and before you know it, you're cancelled.
Yeah, but because people love these sorts of stories. People love getting angry.
Witch hunt is what
of course they do. And that's exactly what this is. I mean, she hasn't done anything. She hasn't said anything. She's just sort of said, oh, actually, I don't want to be disliked by people. But then people love, there's such a cachet. Cancel culture! Cancel culture! I can't believe it. She hasn't been cancelled. Well, she's just written a book.
Well, she said that. She's obviously promoting her book to talk about it.
Of course she is.
But the thing is, she's saying that, and then I'm thinking, well, how can we cancel her? I'm going in there myself because I know what it's like. I mean, people who have attempted to cancel me, but I keep just popping back up again.
Yeah, exactly. So that's testament that cancel culture does not exist.
No, it does exist, but I don't think people... And I mean, you can be defeated by it, though, as she said herself. Look, if she waters down herself to a lesser version of herself, then in a way she's slightly cancelling herself for the sake of being cancelled.
I know, I don't think that's true. I think we all have thoughts, opinions, ideas that we don't always sort of voice with the same vehemence that you would if you were sort of tucked up cosy at home. You know, you don't go to dinner parties and go, oh, Pete and June, you're as boring as stuff. Because that's not a polite thing
to do.
But that's not what people are being cancelled for, is it? It's not that sort of thing. The people are being cancelled for just expressing a different view that isn't the popular view, and that's where she's going with this.
I think it's metered. Like, again, taking the dinner party analogy, let's say some people think that, school teachers have had an easy ride, that they've just been working in their gym jams from home. Again, if
Are you saying that? Do you think that?
I personally don't think that.
Well, you be careful, because otherwise you'd be cancelled. Teachers listening now won't.
I think teachers all right. I could take a teacher. That could be a new segment on the show, Take a Teacher, and you bring in different high school teachers and I'll try and take them. I think that'd be great, sumo wrestling. But if that was the idea, if there were high school teachers that were there, I wouldn't say to them, "You've had an easy ride," because you probably wouldn't end up with any friends and wouldn't end up going to any more dinner parties.
What do you think? Let's come to you, Danny.
Well, I'm relieved that when sumo wrestling was brought up, the camera didn't cut to the token fat guy on the end of the table.
Still on me, actually.
So cancel culture, it's like the virus. It's a pandemic. It's spreading around the world. And Dave, you're right. If you go to a dinner party, you're not going to slag off your guests or the company. But I think that's slightly different, because I think Holly Willoughby may, for example, have certain views on. Let's pick a couple of bingo topics at the moment. Transgender rights, for example. Maybe she believes that a woman is a woman if she has a cervix, but she doesn't want to say that.
Obviously, you're just opposing that.
Yeah. But that's what you could get. No, of course not. But here we go. We're petrified.
But no, we're not petrified.
We are.
But that's the point.
Because
we do have to make that point.
I hadn't even finished my point before I've been cancelled almost.
You haven't been cancelled. It's ridiculous.
But my point, there was an interjection because you were petrified. I was going to say something.
Petrified. I'm just looking at Holly Willoughby's interest and you're
correct,
making sure.
But I actually qualified it by saying, let me just pick a few bingo topics at the moment.
And I re-qualified. Get on with it.
Well, I'd love to get on with it, but she may
in the middle then.
Steve, I think I've eaten into my 60 seconds. Just
have another 60 of mine. This is fun to watch.
Okay, so she may have a real opinion on that, and this is my hypothesis. Okay, I'm not saying that she only believes that women are. Okay, so she may want to express that view, but she knows that she could potentially be cancelled because ITV could pander to the bullies on Twitter that only represent a tiny minority of transgender people anyway, because it's so powerful. And companies are petrified. I mentioned the word petrified earlier. Companies, commercial enterprises are petrified of being associated with someone who could be considered in the slightest bit transphobic.
Yeah, but Danny, that's not her job on This Morning. Her job's not to say, like, this is what I think about trans rights. Her job is to say, here's a duck that can quack the alphabet, or whatever weird fluff pieces they have on.
What she's saying is that you can so easily be misinterpreted that you actually have to be so careful, especially in that environment.
Why are we not celebrating this woman who's actually saying, I am sparing with my words. I think carefully about other people. Isn't that a good thing?
No, it's a good thing.
Think about other people.
But it depends how carefully you have to think. I mean, because what do you think?
Well, I would say you're right, Dave. It's not her job. I mean, from the point of view of interviewing, even if it's not that amazing duck that they interviewed, if they're actually interviewing on some of the more contentious topics, your job isn't to lead in with the interview with, here's what I think. No, find out what the guest thinks. So actually, if she is holding back her opinion to probe more deeply the guest, brilliant, even better at her work. Whether she would then want to spend her own spare time putting her opinions out on social media, absolutely up to her. And actually, you read the article, she's made the decision that it is a balance between, and she doesn't really talk about cancel culture, but the pushback, the hate you could get back. She has an opinion. She tells it to her friends, I would imagine. She just doesn't say it in a forum where she might end up having more trouble than she thinks it's worth. Brilliant. She's made that decision for her, and good luck to her. I don't think she's the victim here at all.
No, I don't think that... I think the point is a different point to that, though. I hear you. So what she puts down, and talks to her friends about and all that. But what she's saying, I think, is ultimately that she seriously has to be super careful that she doesn't say anything. I think she's talking about walking on eggshells around people, even for the most simplest of things that you might say. You could find yourself in a position that is, pretty choppy, and your employer could then decide, well, actually, what you said there, we think that, and you could have the Twitter troll business, and then suddenly you find yourself out of a job. And it's so easy for that to happen, I tell you. I know all about it.
Do you know, Nat, it was so refreshing that Netflix didn't buckle under the pressure of the Dave, what's the comics?
Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, because of the transgender gags.
Yeah.
You know, I watched that. It was hysterical. He makes jokes about paedophilia. He makes jokes that, if you like, reinforce negative racial stereotypes. But the transgender mob, and their bullies, in my view, they actually wanted him cancelled. And it was a relief that Netflix didn't buckle. And I tell you another one, going back to 2018. I don't know if you're fans of boxing, but you know the card girls, the ring girls who show, they walk in scantily clad, whatever. In between. Yeah, there was a massive campaign to get them cancelled, and Eddie Hearn actually said, no, this is ridiculous, because ITV put pressure on the championship darts, because they had walk-on girls, and ITV made a commercial decision to say, we're not going to show this if there are walk-on girls, and that then led to the boxing, and Eddie Hearn said, no, this is ridiculous. It's not sexist, it's not objectifying. This has been part of boxing for decades.
That's not a cancellation, though. That's not like any of these walk-on girls said something that is opposed to, and they're trying to end their
They weren't
careers.
allowed to. They were slapped down. They were like, get back in your box and get your boobs out. That's what they said.
Did not say that.
I'm sure they did.
So it needs more companies to push back, in my view.
Yeah, it needs, I think, it needs people to be strong and confident with their opinions and actually be able to have an opinion. And it doesn't always have to be one that people have to take offence at. If you don't agree on something, then put your own point of view forward.
Yeah, but I think that the nub of the point here is, if you're going to disagree with things, absolutely, I think that's amazing, fertile, brilliant. Social media, probably not the platform.
Possibly not. Well, listen, after the break, it's time to take a look at some of the other headlines today as we discuss the stories that have caught my panel's eye. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Hello there, I'm Polly Middlehurst with your latest GB News headlines. Over 10 million people have now had their COVID-19 booster jabs in the UK. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, is urging the elderly and vulnerable to get theirs to avoid restrictions over Christmas. More than 50 million first-dose vaccines have been delivered now in the UK. And the US is reopening its borders to UK visitors who are fully vaccinated against COVID from tomorrow. Travellers from Ireland and the 26 Schengen nations in Europe, as well as in China, India and South Africa, are among those who are also allowed in from Monday. Sir Keir Starmer says the country's reputation is being trashed by the Prime Minister. That comes after the government tried to prevent the former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson's suspension for breaching lobbying rules. Parliament's due to hold an emergency debate on standards tomorrow. And the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has condemned an assassination attempt on Iraq's Prime Minister and supports his call for calm and restraint. Security has been increased in Baghdad's Green Zone after Mustafa al-Kadhimi was targeted by an armed drone. The attack comes amid tensions sparked by Iran-backed militias who are refusing to accept last month's parliamentary election results. Sport for you now, and Aston Villa have sacked manager Dean Smith after just 3 years in charge. His side suffered a fifth successive Premier League defeat on Friday, losing 1-0 to Southampton. He had, however, guided the club back into the top flight in his first season in charge, and the 50-year-old also led Villa to the League Cup final at Wembley in 2020, narrowly losing 2-1 to Man City. You're up to date. I'm back with more at 6.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
So, good afternoon. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? It's the Great British Debate we've been talking about, and are you confident, this is the question, in sharing your true opinions? We've heard what my panel have to think, but now it's time for your say. So lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Tasha says, the real problem we have is that people on all sides that just don't know how to have a conversation and still be respectful of the person they're having it with, for sure, isn't it? If somebody disagrees with you, it's ridiculous, isn't it? They just feel that they have to have a go at you instead of just having the conversation. Sandra says, I get in terrible hot water for mouthing off. Same here. But I'm always willing to listen to the debate. Reese says, I tell it as it is. If it offends people, then that's their problem, not mine. Alan says, as the saying goes, the truth hurts. Darren put this down. He said, this is part of the problem. People are being bullied into suppressing their honesty. Daniel says, it is cancel culture or just good old-fashioned consequences that people are afraid of. Lionel says, absolutely, and the situation will get worse if proposals to stop people being anonymous online go through. Billy says this, always try to express my opinion, but freedom of speech is now cancelled. I don't like the way this country is anymore. Interesting stuff. Yeah, I hear your pain, I hear you. But it's now time for my bookmark, and this afternoon it's the point where I look at what an author has, his most recent release, and this week we're looking at this. Former SAS soldier and first Gulf War veteran Des Powell has released his new book with co-author Damian Lewis, SAS Bravo 30. It's a gripping story from tales from the Gulf War. And I'm very pleased to say that Des joins me now. Des, welcome to the programme. Now, this book is all about... Hello, hiya. Now, the book is all about your own experience in 1991. So talk to me about what happened.
Yes, the story is about an Iraq mission. We went deep behind enemy lines, an SAS patrol, back in the first Gulf War, back in 1991. Our mission was very, very simple, but it was almost impossible to achieve. We had to find and locate mobile Scud missiles, rockets if you like. And these missiles were being fired from the Iraqi desert into neighboring countries, mainly onto Israel, with an intention of bringing Israel into the war. That would have made that part of the world unstable, and it would have been a larger conflict. And therefore, it would have been thousands and thousands more lives would have been lost. So the book is about the problems that we had trying to achieve that.
Wow. That must be so exciting. I mean, it must be exhilarating, right, being in the SAS. I used to read Craig Thomas Firefox, all the Firefox Down books and all that kind of stuff. What was your background like? Were you somebody who would read those kind of thriller-type spy stories?
No, not at all. I was born in Sheffield, and after leaving school, I joined the steelworks. And no, I was never really bothered about the military at all. In fact, I was very, very surprised that I joined the military at all. I joined eventually at 19-year-old. I joined the parachute regiment, and I served for 8.5 years. And then after that, I decided to take it more seriously, and I volunteered for the SAS. And I had a long service with the SAS. I was there for 19.5 years. I joined Air Troop, and I specialised in high-altitude free-fall parachuting. So total up, I did 28 years, and I really enjoyed the lifestyle.
I bet you did. Is it anything like James Bond? Is it anything like that?
No, a little bit different than that. Probably harder. Let's say harder.
Oh, because he doesn't sort of have any sort of family that you hear of or any kids. Is it difficult to be in that environment to have a family and to, because you're doing things that are sort of top secret, I should imagine?
Yeah, it's brutal on the family because you are forever traveling the world. You are on the road all the time. So to have a family is very, very hard on them. Yes, it's brutal. Relationships are never, ever good. We have long distance relationships. And in fact, in the regiment, we had the highest divorce rate in the British military. Just simply because of that, the families used to worry about us because of the nature of the job. But I think it was because we were always away. We were always on missions, covert missions, and our families were never in the know. So it was very, very worrying for them.
Oh, I don't think I could be with somebody who's in the SAS. Well, that'd be fine. They don't need to tell me anything. But I was going to ask you, though, so this book that you've written, talk to me a little bit more about the plot. And are there any sort of twists in the tale?
Yeah, initially that we had the regiment they told everyone that they were getting involved in the war in a big way, and 3 squadrons had been preparing for weeks in the Middle East, ready for the big conflict that was coming up with Iraq. So the squadron that I was in, we wasn't in the war at the beginning. We just accepted that we wasn't going. But then a twist came about where one of those squadrons came back and replaced us. But initially, we wasn't anything to do with the Bravo patrols. We were there just simply as BCRs, battle casualty replacements. And that was simple, is that 2 squadrons were going to prepare to cross over the border from Saudi Arabia and fight independently through the Iraqi desert up to Baghdad. The squadron that I was in was there as battle casualty replacements because we were told that the regiment was going to lose a lot of men. So just pure and simply, men that were injured and killed, we were there to replace them. It was only later on that the Bravo patrols came about with what I described earlier about Israel coming into the war. And that came about at a later time. And we were actually caught out a little bit because those missions were more complex. And because of their complexity, we didn't have the equipment. And for example, we didn't have the right vehicles, we didn't have the right ammunition, weapons, right clothing, mapping. I mean, my mapping was 1942. Some of the clothing I was wearing was Second World War. And then on top of that, we had the coldest weather on record. Iraq had sub-zero temperatures. In fact, it actually snowed in the desert when I was there. And just to underline that is that it was so cold that men from my regiment actually died with cold exposure. The weather was just so cold.
My goodness, God. And the book, these are mainly true stories, so you haven't embellished it too much?
Oh, not at all. No, these are true stories. People said to me, why have I waited this long to write this story? Well, as you can appreciate, the Gulf War was back in 91. I went on to serve another 15 years within the regiment. And then this year, when we decided to bring it about, I have now been given permission to write this story and to bring it out to the public. So no, everything is true. Not only does it talk about the Iraq war, but it also talks about other missions that I've been on, my life story, and also my life within the regiment. It's a very good book. I think there's something in there for everyone. And yes, I'm very, very pleased to bring it out at this time.
Wow. Well, look, I mean, the book sounds awesome. And just very briefly, is it written in sort of story form, or you're immersed in a story, or is it more a sort of actual book?
No, it's a mixture of all of those. Really, is that it starts off straight away with getting right into the story, action, so to speak. You've got action, you've got intrigue, you've got yes, you've got everything in there. But yes, I've talked to people, some of my friends that have read it, and they said yes, they were immersed in it from the start. The audio book, I am actually speaking on the audio book, so you've got these Yorkshire tones on there. But the feedback that I've been getting about the book is very, very welcoming. I'm very, very pleased. But yes, it's exciting, and I think people who purchase the book won't be disappointed.
Listen, Des, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for that. Looking forward to reading your book. That's former SES soldier and First Gulf War veteran Des Powell. He's written a fabulous book, so you must really try and get hold of that. Now, it's on to our Supplement Sunday, where we take a look at some of the other headlines of the day. And this week, we're kicking off with Danny's story. Insulate Britain. They believe their road blocking campaign is achieving its aim and are therefore planning even more road disruptions. Danny?
I haven't been held up by an Insulate Britain protest.
I don't think they dare.
I'm really... Look, I really hate what they're doing. I understand that they're trying to campaign to lower our CO2 emissions, and they say save lives. Apparently, older people, and if they can't afford to put the heating on, they die during winter months. OK, I understand the mission statement, I get that, but I absolutely hate the way that they're doing it. And I worry, honestly, have you seen the film Falling Down with Michael Douglas? OK, he's stuck in a traffic jam and the air conditioning isn't working, and it's an LA summer's day and his sweat's coming, and he just goes berserk. And he just leaves his car and then goes on a murder spree. I worry that there's going to be a lunatic who's late for an airport flight or whatever at the front of the queue, and he's just going to start...
Well, you see, that's the thing. They have to be careful with their behaviour, because actually even very sensible, sane people might get so angry, especially if they, you know, they're saying that they're trying to protect somebody who's old, who could die of hypothermia over the winter, but yet in one of their protests where a lady had a very severe stroke, and because they couldn't get to the hospital in time, she was paralysed because of the damage to her brain.
And they don't care.
But they're talking about in the future for somebody who's in it. And I hear that, but it sounds like a double standard to me.
I think even with those points, there's an even more fundamental point, is the battle to try and get people to want to do things to be more green is a battle of hearts and minds, and don't make people hate you. I know people who are kind of, it could go either way. They like the idea, they wouldn't want to spend loads of money on it, buying a $5,000 heat pump, but they like the idea of doing things that would make their imprint less. But then something like this happens that annoys them, and then they start to be belligerent. They go, oh, I don't know why I should buy an electric car then. And this is the problem. Then you're radicalising, in very big quote marks, people to make them less interested in the green message. You're selling a message. Don't annoy the people that you need to understand your message.
Well, the other side of it is that we're already on message. I mean, this is not a message. The government are already doing things to try and encourage us to go green, frankly, because it's quite financially in their interest to do so. Because once you buy your electric car, the battery will last, 7 years? Then you can't just replace the battery in the car. It's unlikely you're going to do that. You're going to have to buy another new car. It feels like it's going the same way as the mobile phone. There was a point where you might have bought a battery for a mobile phone. Now, in the first year, that battery works really well. Then come the second year, it starts to be a bit crappy with the way rubbish, pardon, excuse that, but a bit rubbish with the way it sort of charges things. And this is the same with these cars. I suspect in time that charging facility won't be as effective.
And Steve, I said I hate what they're doing, and Steve, you said don't make people hate you. Now, hate is a strong word, and I think the whole panel can agree that people hate them. And they hate what they're doing.
I once went on this weird training course when I used to work in radio, where they showed you people being interviewed about a terrible event, like local murder or something, and they are upset. And then they interview people about what the traffic's like, and they are outraged. I can't believe I have to wait. People are more passionate about these small things. So, I always say, if you've had to be on the M25, you've already had a bad enough day. So this is why those emotions, you're right, they're too big. We shouldn't be hating someone for it, but you do because of how much it just feels it hitting you where you live. So I just think the only thing that's successful about their system is that they get on the front pages because we're enjoying the journalism of hate.
Well, and also most of them don't actually go to work because a lot of them are a lot older. So they've already got their own homes, they've already got, it's fine for them, they can come out and do this sort of stuff. I find it very, very, very annoying.
It's like a cult as well. The end of the world is nigh. Let's glue ourselves to the M25.
Well, that's going to help us.
It is like, you know, the Waco massacre in Texas, in the States. You had a group of wacko lunatics, religious crazies, and they were cult-like figures believing that the world was about to end.
Yeah, there's a gentle comparison with them, I can see, because of the cult-like nature of it.
Yes.
But to be honest, I mean, the way they've gone about things has not really brought anyone to their cause, and we're already doing that. We've got Cop-Out 26 on currently happening. But let's move on to our next story. This is Marks and Spencer's. Now, they're giving out pronoun badges for their staff to show customers what they need to be called: he, she, they, them, blah, 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 blah.
What's wrong with having your pronouns on a badge if you want them?
Because there are 76 gender pronouns. There's too many.
But why is that a wrong thing?
Well,
does it in any way exclude you?
This is your story, is it?
No, it's not my story. I'm just...
Oh, it's my story.
Oh, it's your story. Oh, go for it.
They picked both of my stories.
Both of yours. Did you come with anything?
That was my story. No, go on, let Steve finish it.
No, it feels like, for some reason, I think the concept of pronouns triggers certain people. You feel almost like you are... It sounds to me like you might be annoyed by this, but you're not excluded by anything. It doesn't impact your life if another person has a badge that says a thing. So we can all crack on with our life, can't we?
But Steve, what it tells you, in my view, it tells you that you're dealing with someone who is so hypersensitive about social activism that you dare not put a foot out of place.
This is what Holly Willoughby was talking about.
And also, you know, if I go to Marks and Spencer's, I want to know where their socks are. I don't care about their pronouns. I want to know that the fella's called Dave or she's called Beryl.
But so basically, you're right, it's already a badge. So it's a name badge, so it's a proper noun badge already with some pronouns popped on there. I mean, it's just a noun. It gets stuck into some nouns.
OK, so what about the fact that there are 76 gender pronouns there? So there's hers, herself, herself, ex herself, da-da-da. Are you saying that this is perfectly reasonable and that perfectly sane people put this whole thing together and this seems like a normal way of moving forward in life? 76 of them.
I'll tell you the sane way of doing it is that I was going to come on to that, the perfectly sane way of dealing with it is if it's your badge, you can pick whichever pronouns you want in the same way that I don't complain about whichever proper noun you want to have in your life. But if I get it wrong, let's all chill out about it. This is the thing that pushes us from the centre ground where we can all be like, oh, OK, that's absolutely fine, it doesn't impact my life, we can all be happy, to somehow move to the extremes and have a row. And part of that is because if someone accidentally doesn't read your name badge or accidentally uses the wrong one, we just need to relax about it. It's not a hate crime.
No, because the person who's going to insist on the pronoun is not going to be the calm person that will be happy if you get the pronoun wrong. Because they're so specific about this pronoun, one of 76.
I think they should be more relaxed rather than Nana and myself being exercised about this. I think if my name's Dave and I identify as they or them, I think I shouldn't impose that on people. And if I say to Dave's assistant, oh, don't worry, he's just gone to the underwear section to get me a XXL boxer short, I don't expect Dave to be mortally offended by that.
Yeah, I think if you're aware of the pronoun someone wants, you do it out of politeness. And if you get it wrong, fine. This is why I don't think it needs to be either one exercise.
No, it's because it's a nonsense. We see, listen, if someone lays a load of nonsense in front of you, why do you have to continue to go along with it? Let's be honest here. Let's look at this realistically. Just because somebody's going to be sensitive, there are 76 of them. Look, seriously, I did a whole monologue on it. Ex herself, herself, hers, his, hers. It goes on. Half of them don't even make any sense whatsoever. So when something is getting into the realms of ridiculousness, why must you entertain it?
Well, I refer you to the thing about politeness. If someone says, oh, actually, these are the words that I'd like you to use, out of politeness, you give it a try. I don't know why you wouldn't give it a try out of politeness.
No,
but what you're doing now, you're going to take this to the nth ridiculum stage.
Well, that's what they're doing. Listen,
no,
yes, they do.
They're not trying to take it to the nth point to prove a point.
I identify as a white male, and you will see me as a man.
You are definitely doing the thing I've just described.
No, I'm doing
deliberately trying to take it to the point of there is no one.
76 gender pronouns. That's not a ridiculous level.
Your point presumes that someone sat there going, "How can I do something to a ridiculous level?
That at all.
I'll put these."
That's a huge assumption to make. It doesn't assume that at all, Danny.
My point. It does annoy me a little. You may have noticed, Steve, and I'm with Nana on this. But what annoys me most is when it's a bloke and it says he or him. It's so obvious it's a he or a him. Why do I need to be told that he prefers to be called he or him?
Do you know
Let's see what Marks and Spencer's had to say about this then. Marks and Spencer's has said having pronouns on badges is a simple yet impactful way to make sure that LGBTQ+ identities are respected for employees and customers alike. Wow. Wow. So that's what they've said there, Marks and Spencer's. That's what they're saying about their pronouns. Listen, thank you so much to my panel, Danny Kelly. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
And Steve N. Allen for joining me today. And thank you so much for your company. I'll be back next week at Friday on 4. But next, it's the weather forecast. Enjoy your weekend.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
GBviews